I'm Jeff McDougald. I began working with Maximus Systems here in Ontario back only 3 months ago. I've been in the pig business basically my whole life. Grew up on a farm in Perth County here, a progressive pork operation, and then spent the last 14 years working with Suregain, and then managed to migrate over to Maximus, which I feel has been a very good move for myself. We have Jonathan and Nathan Boss joining us today from their sow barn. We're glad that they were able to join us. The Bosdale swine operation started in the 1970s as about 70 sows fair to finish. In the early 90s, about 1994, they increased productivity to about 350 sows, and that's when they also partnered with PIC to become a multiplier. And then in 2017, they expanded to closer to 800 sows and continued to market genetics throughout Ontario, as well. The pigs that aren't sold as breeding stock are marketed through Conestoga Meat Packers, our cooperative processing plant in the province. We also have Dr. Tom Stein joining us here.
Yeah, Tom Stein, veterinarian by training. Did my PhD thesis, was the development of Pig Champ, and then so I've been in the industry for a long time, and then went on and created a company called MetaFarms, and left that company about 4 years ago and joined with Maximus, really because to recreate software for production management for pigs, but all linked together with the hardware, because that's the way of the future. Is not standalone software. It's software that's linked with hardware, and we already know it because that's what these have taught us over the last few years. So a full-time with Maximus, senior strategic advisor, leading the research and development team on the development of the software, both for the control side and for the production management side.
Thanks, Tom. There's no real kind of formal schedule for today. I mean, the plan is to treat it kind of like a panel interview that we could potentially have had at the OPC, really just to have a nice discussion with Jonathan and Nathan about kind of how they manage their system, some of the benefits that they've seen in collaborating with Maximus and our software, but also just the kind of evolution of their farm and different ways that they are able to manage and kind of work through things. I know that when I was at the farm the first time, seeing some of the performance of the sows was pretty phenomenal. So it's nice to know that that's possible out there. So I guess Jonathan and Nathan, if you want to unmute yourselves and kind of give us an overview of the progression of your farm and kind of how some of the decisions were made and where you've kind of come and gone from. All right.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jeff. And I think, well, you kind of went through the history of our operation. We're a family operation. My dad and his brothers are working together here. We also run a dairy operation. And so my brother Nathan and another brother, and a bunch of cousins, we all work here together between the dairy and sow operation. So yeah, I guess a little bit of background of how we got involved with Maximus is in 2017 when we built our barn. So prior to that, we were researching the different options for loose housing. That was something we hadn't had experience with before. Our barn at the time was all stalls, and so with one of the dealers, I visited a farm in Michigan that had a Maximus ESF and loose housing set up, and was very impressed with the way things work there. And so I think the main thing that really got me interested in it was just the change of focus from a lot of the electronic feeding systems that we looked at were very focused on the small details of how the feeder worked and what a little bell or whistle made their system better than the other person's system. But just the comprehensive nature of the Maximus system was something that really drew my attention when we looked at it. Just the ability to control the environment in the barn from one end, from top to bottom, one end to the other, including all the feeding, all the ventilation, all the data entry and data recording. That was the main thing that I really liked about it.
I mean, a bit more on your operation, Jonathan. I mean, farrow to finish, farrow to part finish.
Oh, sure.
Production.
So we farrow. We're farrow to finish. We don't finish everything. We have about 2,500 spaces that covers enough for all the gilts that we're producing. We sell off the barrows, and you can see a picture here. That's a litter of pure line 3 piglets. So we produce our own replacements within the barn. We're a completely closed herd, and we produce Cambros for sale as for PIC. A nursery is here on site at the sow barn as well. It's pretty quick to catch on. We find everything with the Maximus system. The controls and the data software is all very intuitive. It's easy to use, and like there are some very in-depth things you can do with the controls that you don't do every day, but once you catch on to it, it works really well.
So the whole idea of the software, the production management software, was the idea that the world is moving to these integrated hardware software systems, right? So you've got ESF in gestation, you've got ESF in lactation, you've got controls running, you know, much more than the ventilation system, right? It's running the ESF systems, it's the heating, the lighting, on and on. And so there's software and data coming from all of those places. And most people who are using ESF systems today, they've got to sort of clunkily move the data from the ESF to a third-party software system, sow management system, and then move that data back into the ESF system. And so our whole idea was, hey, let's link all that together into a common database behind the scenes, so that, and make it mobile so that you can be entering information in the barns, reading the RFID that integrates with the tablet, as you can see in the picture, and be able to control things like, hey, I want to adjust the amount of feed for a particular sow based on her condition right from that tablet. So so that was the whole idea, and this picture really shows, you know, what you can be doing with the tablet in the barns to control not only the ESF system, but also to enter the information for the sow management system.
So Jonathan and Nathan, I mean, looking at your, like, we'll kind of compartmentalize this into gestation, lactation, and maybe kind of the software and integration end. If I was to go back some of the slides to the gestation with the layout, I mean, your move from gestation crates over to loose housing. I mean, I think it's a daunting task for many producers out there because of just their experience and kind of that innate ability to know that a sow in a stall is where you left her. With, you know, you get into group housing, you know, people are more scared, I would say, about, you know, kind of the dynamic groups or the static groups, mixing of animals, them finding their hierarchy, and then, you know, sorting them when it comes to loading farrowing rooms and tracking them down. I don't know if you want to talk about kind of the layout of the pens or some of your experience transitioning from kind of conventional to group housing.
So the pens are just a fairly simple layout. They're about 30 feet by 50 feet-ish. They have 5 stations in each one and about 80 sows to a pen. Basically just a big rectangle like what you can see in the picture there, with a couple of partitions to make little cubby holes along the outside wall, and that's where most of the sows lay and spend all their time. You can see kind of a manure area through the middle. And on the days when it gets really, really hot, on the 30+ degree days, most of the floor is covered, like the sows will spread out. It was a big adjustment for us to move to loose housing, and the first year was a lot of work, specifically the first 6 months or so, training the older sows we retained some sows from the old barn, a lot of new gilts as we expanded or a little bit more than doubled, right? So a lot of work the first bunch of months, but now that we have a system in place and we're only introducing a small number of gilts per group, then it goes a lot easier. So one thing I forgot to mention earlier, we're batch farrowing. So two pens makes up a batch of sows. We have 153 farrowing crates. So we put about 75 to 80 sows in a pen, and we split them, older sows on one side and younger sows on the other side.
Going into these barns, these sows are just laying around, and at least in my experience, you can walk through them and they don't jump up. They're amazingly quiet and relaxed. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah, definitely. We find it very quiet in the gestation area. So that was one thing that, like, over the first 6, 8, 10 months that took some adjustment to, and we spent a lot of time just tweaking the feed curves, and when you'd walk through and you'd see at a certain stage that percentage of the pen that's making a lot of noise, you can look at your feed curve and say, are we underfeeding them at this point? And so our vet comes through every 8 weeks or so, and he noticed it over a period of months that things quieted down dramatically. And it's something that we don't always see being in the barn every day, right? But when you get somebody that comes through periodically, that was something he really commented on. And so that's been working really well for us.
Have you had any experience with sows not eating, or being able to find sows that maybe weren't eating their full amount pretty easily?
Yeah, it's not a big deal. It takes, like, usually at the end of the day, there's maybe 2, 3, 4, sometimes a little bit more sows that haven't eaten, and we'll walk. It takes 15 minutes to a half hour as we walk through the pens, just make sure that they have their RFID tags. Sometimes those go missing, or if she's a little bit stiff or lame, then we can treat her. But for the most part, it becomes part of the routine. It's not a big deal.
Yeah. Hey, I wanted to ask you guys about, sort of like your attitude toward technology, and how did you spent quite a bit of time kind of thinking through what you wanted to do and how you wanted to do it. And so what was that process like for you guys?
A good question. One thing that I really paid attention to with the software is how easy is it to use, because regardless of whether you're good with technology or not, the data and everything has to get entered, right? Specifically with the production software. And that's something we really found, is that it's very intuitive, very comfortable to use. It's as easy as writing it down on a sow card.
Yeah, it was an interesting change. We went from having no computer in the barn to having 6 different computers in the barn now, between the Maximus and feeding system, and then the PC computer, and plus tablets and phones. But yeah, we do all of the data entry now on our phones or tablets. We still keep sow cards for the farrowing time, but then after a litter's been entered, then the sow card is irrelevant, which was a good change, because a lot of the time after you're finishing your farrowing term, you collect all the sow cards, and when the data doesn't really match up from what it was at the beginning of farrowing, then there's nothing you can really do about that. But having the data entry live right from when you record it, we found really helpful. Makes a big difference.
Yeah. At what point did you guys move to having the RFID feeders in lactation?
That was just in the last few months. When we initially put them in, they were an older model of feeder, and then the one that you can see behind you there, that we installed those in the farrowing room over the last few months, and they have the RFID reader. The old ones had a trigger that the sow would tap in the trough to drop the feed.
Did the sows eat more in lactation?
Yeah, for sure, and that's something we've really focused on since having these electronic feeders in lactation is getting the intakes up, and that's been making a huge difference to production. Definitely see that in terms of non-productive days, and piglets on the floor is really, and sow condition as well. We measure condition and record it into the Maximus software pre-farrow and pre-wean, working with the software team to get some reports to analyze some of that data. But they're definitely, they retain condition very well on large litters.
Mm-hmm. And you know, from the software side, each one of these controllers has software embedded in it, right? And so, and you can manage and you can see and get into and change these controls if you've got the permission to do it. From, of course, your desktop computer or whatever you've got in your office, or from a tablet, like an iPad that you're carrying around with you, or your phone. So you can go in and see and make changes into these controls. And then, of course, if you've got multiple controls like these guys do, and if you've got multiple sites, like we've got, you know, people who maybe have 100 barns with controls, we came up with software that we call our enterprise software that allows people to manage and view and report across all the controls rather than just going into each one individually. But I think it's interesting to see just how the controls are set up to run these barns.
Yeah, so I know, like Nathan, John, this first one here is kind of your ventilation control, yeah, my understanding. And then you can see the screen on this next one and then the screen on the next one. So this one here is basically a dedicated control for the for farrowing room 1, right? Is that right? And then yeah, this would be a dedicated control for farrowing room 2 as far as the 3P feeders and kind of the data relay back and forth between those. Yeah. So the first time I was there, it was interesting because, you know, this screen, instead of showing the regular kind of barn overview and ventilation, this screen was basically dedicated to those 72 crates and what was going on with those sows within it, right? So it's kind of like a quick snapshot of what's going on in farrowing.
If you want, we can share our screen here and I can pull those up. We can have a look at.
This is the main screen. When you log on your phone, this is what it pulls up. So then the things that you would use each day, I guess, is you know, this is where all your ventilation overviews are. So this is our gestation room, and then it shows each of the fans and whether or not they're running and whether or not they're actually drawing an amperage, so that you can actually know if they are running or not. That's something we found is really helpful. Each of these will lead you to a different shortcut, or each icon is a shortcut, so you can access your different ventilation settings through these overview pages. Then your feed management, so this is where you control your loop feeders each day, the scheduling, and each one has a manual override. And then as well as all of the alarm management. So controlling who receives what alarms, whether that alarm is just a text message or if it's an email or if it's a call, and all of the different settings for that so that you aren't getting too many irrelevant alarms. That's something that has really been something that we've really appreciated, is we can send alarms to the right people.
There's also, yeah, the herd management, and so that is where we would go to look for sows that haven't eaten. So it shows where they are, ID, and then their quantity fed over the last so many days. We don't make any changes in here as far as sow management. That's all done with the mobile software, and that communicates back to here. So for example, you see body condition scores. There's only 3 sows left for today that haven't eaten, but they have 3 different body condition scores listed there. So that would be done before they move to the loose housing at the same time as when we preg check them. we would go through and score them all and record that into the mobile.
I guess with the mobile, you can, the nice thing is you can go and find that sow and kind of give her an overview, right? You can kind of diagnose what's going on and then make a decision right in front of her instead of in the hallway or somewhere else.
Oh, that's right. This shows the farrowing room controllers. Now these feeders are all empty right now. We just weaned yesterday, so the whole farrowing room's empty today. But that's what Jeff was talking about. Instead of a barn overview showing temperatures and fan settings, this page just has a overview of the feeders. Okay, so then here's
Nice.
this is the mobile, how the mobile software looks. So then when we do before we move a sow, then we'll pick her condition score here and then hit save, and then that will put her on the right feed curve through her gestation in the ESF.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess one of the other main changes that we've used since we have the software is rather than cleaning out the farrowing feeders in lactation, we really don't do any feeder cleaning anymore. We only just adjust feeding curves. So if we walk through the farrowing room and we find a sow that has too much feed in her feeder, we adjust her curve down and then it feeds her less. And that's really been a labor saver for us. So when we started in the new barn, then we would still go through every day with a feed pail and clean out the dirty feed. But we've been able to eliminate that now.
Yeah.
So Nathan, that touches on a question that we've had. One of our listeners is asking, what was the adjustment period when you went to the antenna, like the RFID feeding? And then how do you kind of ensure that it's not triggering every time the sow stands up? Like it may stand up but not be looking for feed. So how do you manage that?
Sure. So the way that looks is we set feed level. Now that's over here in the control. So then level 0, she enters at level 0. So that's a 5-minute pause time between each time feed drops. It drops 300 grams at a time. You can see over on the right hand side there. So then in the mobile software here, this is one sow in a farrowing crate, right? So then if I come in there and her feeder is licked clean, then I go here, adjust it to level 1, right? And then that cuts her back to every 3 minutes. Okay. So if she's standing up, it'll drop 300 grams every 3 minutes. The next day, if it's still clean, then I'll jump it up to level 2. Or if I get too far ahead of myself, then you got to back it off a little bit. Or if you have a sow that gets sick and she stands by her feeder and fills the whole thing up and she's got a big pile of feed, then I can back that off so it's 7 minutes or 10 minutes. So that's how we manage the lactation feeders, and that works really well.
Yeah, we really find the sows never actually stand up unless they're hungry. They lay down all day, and unless their head is in the feeder, the antenna won't read her tag and won't feed her. Yeah. So really, that hasn't really been a concern at all where they're getting fed when they shouldn't be. So
that was one of my observations when I was there helping install those new drops, was just the sows. They didn't mind that there were whatever 6 or 8 of us in that farrowing room while they were nursing their litters. They weren't jumping up. It was like they were oblivious, because I think they've just grown accustomed to always having feed when they want it, right? They're not tying feed to humans anymore. So we were there and they didn't care, right? So you're spot on. They stand up when they want feed, and other than that, they're feeding their litter and they're resting and doing their thing.
Yeah.
Back when we were talking about the controls in basically the control room, we had a question that was, why didn't you spread the controllers kind of like throughout the barn, right? Like, kind of one in front of the farrowing rooms, kind of the older style, I guess.
Right. In our old setup, we had all of our controllers in the hallways in the barn. The problem with that is every time you wash, you know, they're there. You can't wash them, or you usually you do wash them and then they break. But we rarely use the actual, the main computers. Almost all of our work is on the mobile. So I think that's really actually been really nice, just to keep all of our controls right in one room.
Yeah. The question that comes up pretty frequently about that is, how do you kind of ensure that your mobile, like your tablet, is safe, right? We've all been in barns where a clipboard falls in the pit. You know, how do you ensure that your iPad or your phone isn't the next to go through the slats?
You buy them used. And yeah, try not to drop them in the pit.
Yeah, I guess it's training, right?
Yeah, that's right. And the nice thing with the software is it goes directly into the database as soon as it's punched in. If I change something on the mobile software here, within seconds it's into the Maximus, into the database software, and also into the Maximus computer. So it goes, or if you drop it, it's not lost, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And you know, this whole, what you were showing on the mobile and the software, the desktop software and the reporting, it's really the whole point, which is, you know, not only in the production system do we have things like, you know, farrowing information and wean information and service information, the typical stuff. But we also, now we have all of this sow feeding information, including, you know, as it relates to the body condition score or changes that you've entered about that sow. So, you know, for everybody who's listening, they're familiar with events in sow management systems. Now you've got all these other events. So in terms of being able to track this information and analyze it, you know, it's such a broader, richer array of information. Plus, you don't have to have this kind of disconnect really between the production software and the, you know, the hardware ESF system and all the rest. It's really the point of the whole thing. And before we probably have to wrap up pretty soon, but I wanted to ask you guys, you know, it's great to have all the technology, and I love the way you guys are making use of it really effectively. But what about performance? I mean, and productivity is you know, I mean, overall productivity, you know, wean weights and on and on. How is that looking for you guys?
Yeah, great. We've had our best last couple of years. This is our best we've ever done in terms of production. We like to take a little bit of credit for ourselves, but I think having the Maximus stuff in here definitely helps with that. Like, lactation feed intake is a huge thing for us. We're able to keep condition on the sows. We're able to wean big piglets. We're averaging probably around just over 13 weaned for the last 6 months on a batch by batch basis.
Yeah, and sow condition coming out of the farrowing room, I think, is something that really has surprised us. There's no sores on the animals. You know, you don't get a lot of sows that are coming out really thin. And yeah, it is a pretty short lactation period at 21 days usually, but we're still averaging right around 6 kilos weaning weight. So that's
and I imagine your wean to you know, wean to service is pretty good.
Yeah, it's like bang on 4 days.
Mm-hmm. So. Yeah, excellent.
Well, thank you, Nathan and Jonathan, for joining us today. I mean, it's been a nice discussion here.